What does a leader surviving an assassination plot have to do with 8 tomato traders being gunned down on a routine commercial trip across a border they had crossed dozens of times before? And why does the answer to that question matter not just to Burkina Faso or Ghana, but to every African nation that shares a border with instability? Because if you believe these are two separate stories that simply happen to occur in the same month, then you are reading the Sahel the way mainstream media wants you to read it. One headline at a time, disconnected, decontextualized, and deliberately incomplete. And if you are someone who refuses that kind of shallow analysis, and demands to understand how these events connect, and what that connection reveals about the forces shaping our continent right now, then subscribe to Traore Insights right now. Hit the like button so this analysis reaches every African who deserves the full picture. Drop a comment telling me where you are watching from, because your perspective matters to this community. And now let me give you what the headlines refuse to give you: the verified timeline, the documented pattern, and the analytical framework that makes everything suddenly clear. Let me establish the factual foundation first, because everything that follows in the analysis section is interpretation, and you deserve to check every source I cite independently, which is precisely why I will name every outlet completely, and give you every date precisely, so that your scrutiny becomes part of this process. On February 14, 2026, according to Reuters and News Ghana, a group of 18 traders belonging to the Ghana National Tomatoes Traders and Transporters Association crossed into northern Burkina Faso on an entirely routine commercial journey, a trip designed to purchase tomatoes for Ghanaian markets, the kind of cross-border trade that has connected West African communities for generations long before any of the borders that divide them were drawn. And what happened to those 18 people in the town of Titao is documented, verified, and demands to be understood in full. Armed militants, subsequently confirmed by Adom Online on February 26, 2026 to be fighters from Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal-Muslimin, the group known as JNIM and directly linked to Al-Qaeda, ambushed the truck carrying those traders, separated the men from the women according to witness testimony reported by News Ghana, opened fire and set the vehicle ablaze, killing 8 Ghanaian nationals, leaving 3 men and 1 woman critically wounded, while 7 women escaped, and the death toll later rose from 7 to 8, after a critically injured victim succumbed to wounds while still receiving treatment inside Burkina Faso, a detail that matters because it means the tragedy was still unfolding days after the attack itself. On February 17, 2026, the Ghana Air Force conducted an emergency evacuation of the surviving wounded, transferring them to the 37 Military Hospital in Accra, with Captain Veronica Adzo Arin, Acting Director General of Public Relations for the Ghana Armed Forces, extending official condolences to the families of those killed. And this military evacuation of civilians who had simply gone to buy tomatoes tells you something critical about the scale of what these families experienced, and the degree to which ordinary commercial life has become a survival calculation in the Sahel. Now hold that image in your mind, because just weeks before those 18 traders set out on that journey, Burkina Faso's Security Minister, Mahamadou Sana, announced on national television, on January 6, 2026, a disclosure confirmed by both Anadolu Agency and People's Dispatch, that intelligence services had intercepted and foiled a sophisticated plot to assassinate President Ibrahim Traoré, and in the minister's documented public statement, the plan involved what he described as the neutralization of the head of state, either at close range or through an operation to plant explosives at his official residence, with Minister Sana naming former transitional president Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba as the individual responsible for planning the operation, raising funds, and recruiting participants, a claim that followed Damiba's extradition from Togo back to Burkina Faso and his detention on charges including embezzlement, corruption, and incitement to commit crimes. This January 2026 plot was not an isolated event either, because according to Time Africa magazine, a major coup attempt had already been foiled on April 16, 2025, involving serving and former soldiers with alleged links to militant networks, with documented threat patterns extending as far back as 2023. Establishing what the evidence forces us to call a consistent and escalating campaign against the current government, rather than a series of coincidental incidents. And the broader security landscape surrounding all of this is documented with equal precision, because according to ACAPS, the United Nations-affiliated crisis analysis organization, in their January 31, 2026 assessment, non-state armed groups including JNIM and the Islamic State in the Greater Sahara now control approximately 40% of Burkina Faso's territory, with more than 2 million people representing nearly 10% of the entire national population internally displaced, and according to analysis published by Ghana Web in February 2026, JNIM commands between 5 and 6,000 fighters by current estimates, and has been methodically expanding its operational reach southward into coastal West African nations including Togo, Benin, and Côte d'Ivoire, having conducted its first documented attack on Nigerian soil in late 2025, a geographic expansion that changes the nature of this conflict from a Burkinabe crisis into a regional emergency. Then just 6 days after those 8 Ghanaian traders were being mourned, Ghana's Foreign Affairs Minister Samuel Okudzeto Ablakwa traveled to Ouagadougou and returned with 7 signed bilateral agreements from the 13th meeting of the Permanent Joint Commission for Cooperation between Ghana and Burkina Faso held on February 20, 2026. According to News Ghana, with a new joint security framework announced on February 21, 2026, and the speed of that diplomatic response, 7 agreements signed in record time after 8 citizens died, is itself a data point that raises the central question this analysis will now answer, which is whether these events, the assassination plots, the Titao attack, the emergency diplomacy, represent isolated crises being managed one at a time, or whether they are 3 pressure points inside a single larger pattern, a pattern with a documented structure, a name, and consequences that no West African government can afford to misread. Now here is where critical thinking activates, because facts without analytical context are just isolated data points. But facts arranged with attention to timing and awareness of who benefits transform into intelligence that empowers you to see what others miss. So let me walk you through what emerges when we stop treating these events as separate headlines and start reading them as connected signals. 3 patterns emerge from the timeline I documented, and the first is temporal clustering, meaning the unusual concentration of major events within a compressed window. Because in January 2026, an assassination plot is foiled. In February 2026, 8 Ghanaian traders are killed by militants controlling 40% of Burkinabe territory. And within 6 days, 7 bilateral agreements are signed after years of minimal action. And when events cluster this tightly, the question is not whether they connect but how. The second pattern is geographic expansion. Because JNIM is not static. According to Ghana Web, this organization has pushed southward over 18 months from Mali into Togo, Benin, Côte d'Ivoire, and conducted its first Nigerian attack in late 2025. Which means Titao was not an anomaly but a trajectory moving toward Ghana's border. The third pattern is what I call the sovereignty-security paradox. Because Traoré has expelled French forces, nationalized mines and formed the Alliance of Sahel states, policies earning popular support, while making him a target. Yet simultaneously his military cannot defeat an insurgency controlling nearly half the country, creating a trap where he cannot focus on political threats because security is existential, and cannot focus on insurgency because political threats keep materializing. And this is how pressure campaigns work, attacking multiple vectors simultaneously. Now let me present competing hypotheses. Because intellectual honesty requires acknowledging the evidence supports more than one interpretation. Hypothesis 1 suggests coordinated destabilization, meaning the plots, militant expansion, and security crisis are interconnected elements of a campaign against the government disrupting established interests. And supporting evidence includes escalating coup attempts. Since 2023, timing of threats coinciding with policy announcements, Damiba's naming connecting plots to the previous regime, and historical precedent where leaders pursuing resource nationalism faced sudden security intensification. And if correct, the Titao attack represents strategic pressure, demonstrating the government cannot protect civilians. Hypothesis 2 suggests independent convergence, meaning multiple actors pursue separate agendas, creating overlapping pressure without coordination. And supporting evidence includes JNIM's own organizational logic, driving expansion regardless of who governs, the commonality of Sahelian coup plots, without external direction, and documented military challenges every regional force faces against decentralized insurgents. And if correct, the pattern is correlation not causation. Hypothesis 3 suggests hybrid dynamics, which I find most consistent with evidence, meaning JNIM operates by its own logic, but that logic can be exploited by actors benefiting from instability. Damiba has genuine grievances, but may receive aligned support, and the pattern reflects convergent opportunism, where different actors compound each other's effects without direct coordination, explaining why it looks orchestrated without requiring centralized conspiracy. What I offer now is a framework applicable beyond this case to any African leader facing simultaneous crises, and I call it the sovereignty squeeze model. The first axis is internal pressure, including coup plots, assassination attempts, and institutional resistance, and for Traore this includes January 2026's plot, April 2025's attempt, and earlier 2023 incidents, functioning to divert attention towards survival rather than policy, and to create constant uncertainty, discouraging allies from commitment. The second axis is external pressure, including militant activity, cross-border threats, and diplomatic isolation, and for Traore this includes JNIM controlling 40% of territory, 2 million displaced, southward militant expansion, and complicated ECOWAS relations, functioning to demonstrate the government cannot provide security, and to drain resources through constant combat. The third axis is civilian cost, the dimension mainstream analysis ignores, including the 8 Ghanaian traders, 2 million displaced Burkinabe, communities under militant control, and ordinary people whose survival depends on crossing borders that became war zones, and tracking this answers whose interest continuation serves, and whose lives are sacrificed. When you apply this model to documented evidence, simultaneous pressure on all three axes intensifies at the same moment, internal through the plot disclosure, external through JNIM's expansion, civilian through Titao, and the question is whether this simultaneity is coincidence or structure. The implications extend beyond Burkina Faso, because if the sovereignty squeeze accurately describes pressures facing Traoré, it predicts what any African leader pursuing similar policies will face, meaning the lesson being taught reaches every president across the continent, that sovereignty has costs extracted simultaneously from multiple directions until the leader moderates or is removed, and those 8 traders are part of that lesson. Civilians whose deaths demonstrate no one is safe when a neighbor is being squeezed, which explains why 7 agreements signed after their deaths matter, because Ghana must now choose between maintaining distance from a pressured government, or accepting that pressure spills across borders regardless, and that impossible choice between solidarity and self-protection is exactly what the squeeze creates. To understand how the dynamics I have described actually manifest in the lives of ordinary people caught inside the sovereignty squeeze, I want to explore a plausible scenario based on documented patterns from the Lake Chad Basin crisis between 2014 and 2017, and I need to be absolutely clear before proceeding. What follows is not a claim about specific events that occurred in this case, but rather an analytical model for understanding how competing pressures crush civilian populations, built on historical precedent where we watched similar dynamics unfold with devastating consequences. So with that framing established, let me illustrate how such situations typically develop. Imagine a trader in a border region, where militant groups have been expanding their territorial control for months, a person whose family has conducted cross-border commerce for generations, buying goods in one country and selling them in another, the kind of economic activity that predates every modern border and every modern government. And this trader faces a calculation that has no good answer, because stopping trade means no income, and no income means the family does not eat. But continuing trade means crossing through territory where armed groups operate, where military convoys pass, where the line between civilian and combatant has become invisible to everyone carrying a weapon. In scenarios like this, based on documented patterns from northeastern Nigeria, northern Cameroon, and the Niger border regions during the Boko Haram expansion, traders typically develop informal intelligence networks, sharing information about which roads are passable on which days, which checkpoints are manned by which forces, which towns have seen recent violence, and this information economy becomes as valuable as the goods being traded, except the information is never complete, and never reliable, because the situation changes faster than knowledge can spread, and so traders make decisions based on partial data and hope, calculating odds that no mathematical formula can capture, because the variables include human cruelty and randomness, and the particular mood of whoever happens to be holding a gun at a checkpoint on any given morning. The historical pattern from Lake Chad shows what happens when such calculations go wrong, because between 2015 and 2017 hundreds of traders, farmers, and fishermen were killed in that region, not because they were combatants, but because they were present, because armed groups seeking to control economic activity either taxed them or eliminated them, because military forces conducting operations sometimes failed to distinguish between civilians and fighters, because the mere act of economic survival in a conflict zone became interpreted as collaboration with one side or another depending on who was doing the interpreting. What makes the sovereignty squeeze particularly devastating for civilians is that the pressure on all three axes I described creates conditions where no choice is safe, because if militants control the territory, then cooperating with them means potential targeting by government forces. If government forces conduct operations, then being present means potential targeting as suspected militant supporters. If you flee, then you join 2 million displaced people, competing for resources in camps and cities that cannot absorb them, and if you stay and try to continue normal life, then you become one of the 8 traders on a truck in Titao, ordinary people, whose routine commercial activity intersected with extraordinary violence. Whether or not specific sequences resembling this scenario occurred in the Titao case, the structural pressures are documentable through the evidence I have already cited. JNIM controls 40% of territory according to ACAPS. 2 million people are displaced. The militants separated men from women before opening fire according to witness testimony reported by News Ghana. And these facts establish that the general dynamics I have described are not speculation but documented reality. The scenario simply illustrates how abstract statistics translate into impossible human choices. Now let me close with intellectual humility rather than false certainty, because the analysis I have presented represents one interpretation of available data, and reasonable people examining the same information might reach different conclusions about causation and coordination and intent. I could be wrong about the sovereignty squeeze model. I could be seeing patterns where only coincidence exists. I could be attributing strategic logic to events that are actually chaotic and uncoordinated. And I hope that is true, if the alternative means that African leaders pursuing sovereignty will continue facing this kind of multi-axis pressure campaign, designed to force them back into compliance with established interests. What I am confident about is not my specific hypothesis, but the importance of asking these questions regardless of which interpretation is correct. Because whether the pattern is coordinated or convergent, the civilian cost is real, the 8 traders are dead, the 2 million are displaced, and the expansion continues southward toward countries that have not yet experienced this level of violence. And understanding the mechanics of how this happens is the first step toward building systems that prevent it. So what should you do with this analysis? And I am asking this seriously because information without action is just entertainment, and I did not build this breakdown for entertainment. First, apply the sovereignty squeeze model to situations in your own country or region. Ask yourself what internal pressures your government faces, what external pressures compound those internal threats, and most importantly what civilian cost is being ignored, while analysts focus only on leadership survival. Because once you learn to see all 3 axes you cannot unsee them, and that awareness changes how you evaluate every headline you encounter. Second, demand that your government explain its position on regional solidarity versus self-protection. Because the 7 agreements Ghana signed after Titao represent a choice, and you have the right to know what your country committed to, what security cooperation means in practice, what happens when the next attack occurs, and whether your leaders are building genuine partnership or simply managing optics after tragedy. Third, recognize that the traders who died in Titao were not abstractions. They were members of the Ghana National Tomatoes Traders and Transporters Association, people with names and families and communities that are mourning right now, and their deaths should not become just another data point in geopolitical analysis, but should instead fuel the demand for systems that protect civilian populations from becoming collateral damage in conflicts they did not choose and cannot escape. The pattern I have documented will continue unless enough people understand it clearly enough to demand change. And that is not pessimism but realism, grounded in historical observation. Because the Lake Chad crisis continued for years while the international community issued statements and held conferences and pledged support that never materialized at scale, and the Sahel crisis is following the same trajectory, unless the people most affected organize to interrupt it. Share this analysis with someone who needs to understand what is happening in the Sahel and why it matters beyond the Sahel. Challenge my interpretations in the comments if you have evidence that contradicts what I have presented. Add information I might have missed about the Titao attack or the bilateral agreements or the assassination plot. Because this community gets stronger when scrutiny is welcomed rather than deflected. If you found value in this breakdown, if the sovereignty squeeze model gave you a framework you can actually use, if you want more analysis that respects your intelligence and cites sources you can verify, then subscribe to Traore Insights, because this work continues and the next analysis is already being researched. The 8 traders who went to buy tomatoes and never came home deserve to be remembered not just as victims but as evidence of a pattern that can be understood. And if it can be understood, then it can be interrupted. And if it can be interrupted, then their deaths were not meaningless but were instead the cost of a lesson that we must refuse to waste. That work continues, that analysis continues, and together we become impossible to manipulate because we see the pattern clearly now. Action.